Yeah, you don't want to step on all the candy. That's a lot there. Hi. So my talk is called The Other Side of Empathy, and I'll get into what that exactly means pretty soon. But a kind of apt description is kind of an intro into encouraging and exemplifying empathy. So again, hello. So who am I? Why am I up here? How did I get here? So I am Nick Hehr, Hehr if you're from Germany. I am first and foremost an empathetic community member. I am a maintainer of one of the hoodie projects, one of the many different modules that they have and they put out. I am recently a TESL project team member, and I am also an organizer of a meetup in New York called Manhattan JS. So one of the many borough JS. So yeah, we had a couple of people here tonight who have spoken there too. And then you can find me online at Hipster Brown. So look for Charlie Brown with a mustache, and that's me. And if you may have noticed now, I have a pretty wicked mustache. But an important thing to note is it's not to be touched. It may sound like a weird request, but it's happened before. So just going to put it out there. So yeah, why am I here talking about empathy? Why do I care so much about it? I could say it's because I studied psychology and leadership in college, and not really CS, but really learned more about how people work together. It could be because as a front-end developer, I'm constantly collaborating with different types of people, different backgrounds, designers or developers. But for the most part, it's just because I love community. And the JavaScript community and the web development community and node bots and all these types of things, it's the community that led me into exploring those options. It's the people there that keep me there and make me want to work more and make me want to work on open source and contribute back. And I just really love it. And now, who else should care? It's a pretty easy question, everybody. I know. Crazy, right? It's really wild. But it's something that we should all care about because it impacts all of us. You all are here today because you care about something. You care about learning, you care about talking and meeting with other people in the community, or you care about candy or shirts that you get at the, at the front. So it's called The Other Side of Empathy, but what is empathy? We may have heard it as like seeing the world through the eyes of someone else, taking the walk in someone else's shoes, and it's very general. It doesn't give a lot of apt description, but I like to think of it as the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It's not necessarily all feelings and emotion, but being able to understand and connect with them is really true empathy as I see it. So where did the other side of empathy come from? So as anyone who uses Twitter, there tends to be some negative thoughts that come out. Something new comes out, like maybe the Instagram icon that got released yesterday, and there are many snap judgments that people come up with. There are people who instantly have something and they take to Twitter and it's like 140 characters firing off one. And then this mob mentality forms around it, and it's just a layer of negativity that's hard to get through, and I'm gonna say it just really bums me out. And it's hard to see some of the positive sides of the internet when stuff like that happens. And I wanted to be able to see and connect with those people and be like, but if you knew the person who worked on that, would you say it to their face? Would you be able to connect with them that way? And if you could empathize with them, would you say the same thing? And we've heard from Rachel about how she was so fearful of contributing and becoming part of the open source community because of those negative things that happen. It's not just Twitter, it happens in a lot of open communities. So how can we resolve that? How can we add empathy and encourage it from our perspective and get and receive it as well? So the other side is encouraging it as well as being able to receive it back. So it breaks down into kind of 4 tenets, I like to say. One of them is context, constructive feedback, as Rachel has mentioned before. Communication is very important, and last of all, caring. And these are kind of what I'll be going through in depth and describing kind of how these apply to my everyday job, and as well as how I am impacted by the open source community and things I've learned from it as well. So I gave you all that background knowledge. That's basically a context. So another description, that internal and external factors that influence the decisions we make and the actions we take. Internally, it could be subconscious. It could be something, or it could be external factors by the way people we've learned from others. So it relates into this other side theory in that no one is unopinionated. We have something that we have some kind of bias that we have. We may not recognize it right away, but it's there. We've heard of unopinionated frameworks, but the fact that it's not a framework, but a library or a bunch of modules is an opinion about how they want to structure their project. We all have biases, like I said, you may recognize it or not. An important part of context is listening. If someone's trying to give you some information and you're not listening, or we're not listening back, then it just kind of negates the whole part of empathizing with them. And of course, asking why. And asking why in a good way, in an intentional way, and wanting to learn from it. And just continue asking why until we find out and can connect with them. And not why in a condescending way, like Rachel has heard from before, and kind of feigning ignorance. And we can do this a bit more and set the example around giving context and receiving it in a great way that I've done it at work and have been encouraged to do it more in open source projects is code comments. Code comments are a really easy way for people to read through a snippet of code and understand what the author was thinking about during that time. It's the ability for someone to jump into the author's brain and say, what the heck were they thinking, or what the heck was I thinking while writing this bit of code? And especially with hardware, I've become more aware of how important this is. So this is something actually straight out of the Tesla CLI. And it's dealing with Node JIP, which is binary modules, doesn't really matter, but seeing that Python is inside this Node script might help clear up why the heck this is here. Without all this kind of story and train of thought that we can follow along with, we wouldn't really be able to follow that if we had to continue with it later. Or if someone else was trying to jump into the project and contribute and saw just a bunch of nonsense, they're like, why is this here? I'll just remove it. And then we can just remember what's going on again. And so remembering context, for me, comes in kind of 4 steps. I generally take a deep breath, and then I try to push aside some of the snap judgments that come up. I'm very clear on recognizing what comes up, acknowledging those biases and trying to see where they come from, but making sure that's not the first thing that comes out of my mouth. Sincerely asking why. Why did they choose to do this thing? Where did this context come from? And then listening. Really, really listening and trying to pull in and parse what they're saying, and then asking why if you don't understand again. Don't make assumptions, and sincerely try to connect with them. And once we get that context, and once we give our context as well, we might start asking for constructive feedback. And understanding and getting to get responded with empathy. So constructive feedback, very simply put, is the return of information that helps to develop or improve anything. It can be a blog post, code, design, and it's that constructive part of it that is key. There's negative feedback. Constructive criticism isn't great either, and we just want, or even positive feedback, and I'll go into that as well. So we may have heard when we were younger, at least when I went to school, it was a lot of, if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say it at all. It's kind of the golden rule, or do unto you what you would have done to, or something like that. And somewhere between grade school or primary school when we're taught that, we tend to kind of lose it. We don't remember where it came from, or even as we become adults, why we should keep remembering this. And for this talk, I specifically want to talk about this constructive part of it. So when giving feedback, just saying, that looks great, that rocks, and when we're genuinely asking for constructive feedback, that doesn't really help. And so we kind of want to ask for, if you don't have anything constructive to say, don't say anything at all. We may have seen like GitHub comments, the +1. It's great to get that feedback, but it's just going to cause noise for that feed, that issue. We want to get genuine constructive feedback that can help people using it or help it improve later on. And then some people kind of have brought up before, what about negative feedback? And as I've talked to some people on Twitter before, again, back with Twitter, negative feedback might make change, but good feedback takes more than 140 characters. As Rachel may have referenced before, getting feedback and trying to get help on Twitter, it's really hard. You lose context. People will jump into random bits of the conversation, not seeing what was happening before, and not just getting enough information to give a really helpful comment. Yeah, the whole 140 characters problem. Maybe we shouldn't use Twitter for that type of stuff sometimes. There could be better ways. And so constructive feedback is mutually agreed upon, like asked for. Like Rachel referenced before, is like random people coming in for someone's first contribution when it's generally not asked for yet. If they release it and people jump in without being acknowledged that they're being asked for constructive feedback, it becomes off as defensive for the people receiving it. And it's set up with expectations. Okay, I'm getting code review, which I'll reference soon, and the expectation is that I want you to focus on this part of the code, not this part. I recognize that it's not great, but it's going to be distracting if we start focusing on it now. It's in an open space, and by open space, I don't necessarily mean like a big room, but I mean in a way that people can pull back from that feedback if it's too much for them, if it's anxiety-driven, if it becomes just too stressful that they can pull away whenever they want to. It's not someone coming up to their chair and saying, hey, I have some thoughts about this, and they're just like, I can't do this right now. There's not. And it's also shared with context. We need context behind why they think this is good feedback. So yeah, code reviews are a really easy example at work and in open source. And they're intended to find and fix mistakes that are overlooked. Improving an overall quality of software and developer skills. Overall quality can be kind of subjective, but the fact that they want to improve it is the big thing. It's not commenting on spelling mistakes if that's not what's being focused on for constructive feedback. And we can encourage it too, especially within open source. There's some great little things that GitHub has provided and other platforms as well. Contributing.md files. Whenever someone tries to open a pull request or create an issue, we have these guidelines for you to view. And not everyone may click on that, but they're available for people to view. Some of my favorites are the Atom project, has some great guidelines and with emoji and great descriptions, as well as the Hoodie project. I'm a little biased, but it's really, really perfect. They go into all sorts of things about how the project is managed and how they can help out in any way with writing, issues, and even code. And then recently, issue templates started popping up for GitHub repositories, as well as GitLab has had them for a while. And it's great for setting up, okay, I need this feedback from you. I need this context in order to really help out, and so you can give me proper feedback on something that's bugging you or something that you want to help fix. And all of this type of context and constructive feedback comes through proper communication. Basically, the successful sharing of ideas and feelings between people. And ultimately, communication is how we interact with each other. We communicate by talking in the hallways, communicate online. There's so many people who I've communicated solely online and then just got to meet at conferences. And having that solid communication beforehand helped me feel more comfortable meeting them in person. So it relates in what we say, how we say it, and where we say it as well. In how we say things, I statements are very, very nice for giving constructive feedback, saying, I saw this thing that will help improve this code, I believe. But it's not good for getting context, saying that I know this is better just because. It's not great for that. Use statements are great for getting context. Why did you make this decision? Why did you choose this library? Why did you choose to have this arbitrary number of timeouts? But it's not great for giving constructive feedback. You should fix this. You have done this wrong. That's not great. And for communication, we have so many different mediums to communicate through now. At work, we communicate through so many different options, and they all have their own purpose. Slack is a great general, super quick chats, especially for remote employees or even people around the office for just quick feedback with a group. Stand-ups are great for giving more in-person, one-to-one context, and then recorded discussions that come through GitHub issues that can be referenced later. And then, of course, long-form or async, email is the perfect option. We don't always need to answer right away. Email is great to give people time and measured feedback and discussions. Mailing lists might be another thing, but we'll go into that another option. And we can create communication. I have one point here I want to touch on. The word sucks is kind of a trigger word for me because it provides no context, it provides no constructive feedback, and just kind of, it's dead in the water as far as continuing and creating empathy. Whenever I hear someone says something sucks on Twitter or in just general comments, it doesn't help me. It doesn't help the person who's getting feedback. And unless you're talking about like DJ Roomba sucks or some kind of other vacuum, sucks has really no benefit. And sometimes, yes, something sucks, but we can be more descriptive to help out other people. As I said before, there are many other mediums to chat with people, especially online, and giving more characters than 140 to chat with other people. There's Slack, Hehr, IRC, that still exists. I know Slack's very popular, but IRC still exists as well. And of course, GitHub. And Slack I really like because of the customization options. So in the hoodie Slack and some other Slacks, I've added this little line in the Slack bot to say, when someone says something sucks, could you be more descriptive? I don't understand, could you empathize on that? Or just different options to try to pull more information from them so that I can understand and others can understand what they're going through and how we can help fix it. And ultimately, all of these options, they require caring. It's providing the need of something and showing interest in it, genuine interest in it. It's caring is sharing. It's listening. And ultimately, as I said in the beginning, it's understanding and connecting with people. And we can show how much we care as contributors and maintainers and even people trying to use and as part of the community around a project or a library or a person. Do you care enough to write a blog post to kind of go through your steps? That gives so much context that we can read a long-form answer of that. Do you care enough to file an issue? If you have a GitHub account and you're able to file an issue or even send an email as an issue to someone, do you have that time? Can you? Can you send the email? Do you have enough time to record a screencast? That really helps give a lot of context with kind of arbitrary details that someone might not add through text. I mean, a picture's worth 1,000 words. A screencast will give you 1,000,000. And do you even have enough time and availability and care to submit a pull request? I know not everyone has the technical knowledge or even the time or even the privilege to go and contribute to that. But if you have the time and the ability and someone else is working on something else overall or just does not have the bandwidth to do that, can you actually start helping at least, and then they can help finish you along the way? And of course, don't give in to hate. It leads to the dark side. We shouldn't hate on things in the sense that we care so much about it that we hate that it's not getting done. It's more about what can we do to help in any way possible. Documentation is super important. As I've been learning more and more throughout working on open source and even internally in companies, wikis, code comments, style guides, pattern libraries, even a README. A simple README can go so far to helping encourage contributions or empathizing with the creator of a project. And then we can exemplify caring in so many different ways. I'm going to embarrass her right now, but it's one of my favorite things that's come up recently has been Suze Hinton's AVR Girl test pilot. It's an example of going above and beyond caring about contributors and the community for a project. It's an app that she bundled with the CLI for AVR Girl Arduino, and it helps people who want to contribute to automatically run through her hardware test suite with whatever board they have on them. That has to do with Arduino, and there's so many out there that this helps her not buy everything, and it helps her contribute logs about maybe something went wrong, and in their environment that she can get a lot of context from that. And because they're opting into sharing what they want, they have the option to be added as a contributor to the project, which is just great. It helps that green graph, even though it doesn't mean that much and you shouldn't care too much about it. Some people do, and they want to see that on their timeline and see that, oh, I helped out this project. So Suze has made that a great part of encouraging and caring more about the project. And this is great reasons why to create something like this. Manual testing is boring, and she recognizes that. You don't get the little green square, and most people who have hardware know how to start. There's a lot of assumptions with the hardware background where, oh, I know you know this, so just run it and you're fine. Or set up a compiler and you're good to go. But not everyone has that time, even if they're getting started with hardware. And sometimes there's too many steps involved, like I said before. Who knows how to cross-compile something off the top of their head, or wants to even spend hours Googling for that? And then within open source and work, I've gotten a lot of mentors. Mentoring really matters. Do you remember starting out and not knowing anywhere you're going? Did you even have a mentor? Did you want one? If so, why not? If you did, then what happened? And do you want to learn? Mentoring and trying and teaching will force you to learn so much about a subject that you're able to give it back in a more cohesive and approachable way. And kind of a word of warning about how much we care and being aware of what we actually care about. I ran into an issue with this recently for myself at work, and I was starting to care more about a project and the code involved because I was working on it so hard and I thought it would solve a lot of solutions. And I began to ignore the things I cared most about, but had just completely pushed them to the wayside. My communication was opaque. I didn't give proper communication or proper feedback or pay attention to it as well from when I was getting feedback from others. And I was putting so much work and care into just the project, I forgot about the people and the people I had to work with. And it was very embarrassing for me because I became the hypocrite of my own message. And code can be easily tossed aside and built again. But relationships with people, either professionally or personally, take more time to mend and will prove useful than any line of code I'll ever write. If anyone's ever read the 10 Commandments of the Egoless Programmer, it applies to so many different things, and that helped me recognize what I was actually focused on and how wrong I was. And be able to recognize and care enough to push aside your own ego and try to connect with others, even if it means pushing aside a project that you've worked so hard on, can be difficult, but enormously helpful. And contributing back with empathy in anything we do, it could be just listening for a day. Just take a moment and listen to what people are saying and understand with them. Apply the examples that I've gone over. We can start off small, too. It doesn't have to be everything at once. You can just start maybe just trying to put a README in one of your project repos, or just starting to influence and ask for more code comments, or just asking for feedback sincerely, and remaining open to sharing what others are saying or what you're sharing as well, and be able to communicate with that with others. And some people might view this and say, well, that still sounds like a lot of work. I'm sorry, it's just got to deal with it. It's something that's really going to matter, and it's something that's going to benefit everyone. Because by applying empathy to what we do, we can connect with others professionally and then begin to connect with others personally. Some of my resources, some of my favorite resources to get started, especially with the type of empathy I'm speaking about. Practical Empathy is a great book to start out with. Nonviolent Communication is really helpful for recognizing those I, you statements and realizing more about how we communicate with people. Creativity Inc., if you haven't noticed, I really love Pixar and Disney. It's a great way to see how people work together creatively and learn more from each other. But I also gather a bunch of resources that aren't just books at this website. I love the URL, and I was fortunate to find it, moreempathy.online. And I've started it back when I went to JSConf EU, back September, but it's fallen to the wayside, unfortunately, because of other projects. But I would love your help. It is open source, and it's under my repo, Hipster Brown, the other side of empathy. And I created a README because I realized last night I didn't have a README for it. And so I was like, all right, I got to get this up and get it going. And your help would be enormously helpful. Like, if you saw something that helped you understand someone else, it could be a blog post, a book, a video, a podcast even. I love podcasts, and I learn so much from hearing people talk and listening because there's no visual distraction. And it really helps. And I have some hopefully very helpful instructions of how to contribute either on the web or even through the command line, because I know not everyone is as adept with Git on the command line or even locally. So that's basically it. I want you to go out, look for empathy, try to understand it, and connect with other people, and contribute to this list for other people to learn from as well. Thank you.